The boot came at her ribs like a missile. Not a training strike, not a demonstration, a full-power combat kick designed to shatter bone and collapse lung tissue. The kind of attack that ends fights and destroys careers. Captain Kira Stone didn't step back. She moved forward into the violence, her left hand catching the ankle mid-flight with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in places where hesitation meant death. Her right hand drove upward into the extended knee joint, applying force against the architecture of ligament and cartilage in the direction God never intended. The crack echoed across the parade ground like a rifle shot. 500 Marines went silent. The kind of silence that follows catastrophic violence when the brain is still processing what the eyes just witnessed. Master Sergeant Wade Kruger's scream came a heartbeat later, raw and primal, stripped of the machismo that had filled the training arena moments before. He collapsed onto the concrete, his leg bent at an angle that made combat veterans look away. Kira stood over him, her breathing steady, her face calm as winter stone. "Class is in session," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the frozen crowd. "Lesson 1. Underestimating your opponent gets you carried off on a stretcher." This is where the story ends. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back. Back 96 hours. Back to when Captain Kira Stone first drove through the gates of Camp Pendleton, California, with no idea she was about to expose the Marine Corps' darkest secret. The heat hit Kira the moment she stepped out of her Jeep. August in Southern California. Dry, relentless. The kind of heat that turns parade grounds into blast furnaces and makes dress blues stick to skin like a second layer. She'd grown up with this heat, trained in it, fought in it. Desert Storm, 1991. She'd been 22 years old, a fresh-faced Marine with something to prove. 13 years later, at 34, she had nothing left to prove to anyone, except, apparently, to the 500 Marines who were about to watch her demonstrate close-quarters combat techniques with a master sergeant who'd made it clear he didn't think women belonged in his corps. Camp Pendleton sprawled before her like a small city, 18 miles of California coastline converted into the Marine Corps' premier West Coast training facility. Kira had been here before, years ago, when she was still learning how to be a warrior instead of teaching others. The base hadn't changed. Same Spanish-style buildings, same palm trees standing sentry along the main road, same smell of diesel fuel and gun oil, and young men testing their limits. What had changed was her. Kira Stone wasn't the eager recruit anymore. She was a sniper instructor with 47 confirmed kills during Gulf War operations. She'd earned her place in rooms that didn't want her, on teams that doubted her, in combat zones that tried to break her. She'd survived not because the system supported her, but because she'd learned to be better than the men around her. Faster, smarter, more lethal. The Marine Corps hadn't given her anything. She'd taken it. A young lieutenant approached across the parade ground, his boots striking concrete in perfect rhythm. 28 maybe, clean cut, with a kind of posture that suggested he'd been waiting for her arrival like it was honor guard duty. "Captain Stone?" His salute was crisp, textbook. "Lieutenant Finn Calloway, ma'am. I've been assigned as your liaison during your time here." Kira returned the salute. "At ease, Lieutenant. You can drop the formality. We're not on a parade deck." Calloway's shoulders relaxed fractionally, but his eyes remained sharp. Scottish heritage, Kira guessed, from the bone structure and the hint of red in his dark hair. The kind of Marine who took his job seriously, but hadn't yet learned to separate the institution from the mission. "Ma'am, I need to give you the full picture before we head to the briefing." Calloway lowered his voice, even though they were 50 meters from the nearest soldier. "There's been some talk about you, about a female instructor leading close-quarters combat training." Kira almost smiled. "Let me guess. The talk includes phrases like diversity hire, political correctness, and probably some creative speculation about how I earned my rank." Calloway flushed. "Ma'am, I didn't. I'm not asking if you said it, Lieutenant. I'm confirming what I already know." Kira started walking toward the command building, and Calloway fell into step beside her. In my experience, there are three types of men in the military when it comes to women in combat roles. Type 1 genuinely doesn't care as long as you can do the job. Type 2 wants to be supportive but can't get past their conditioning. Type 3 sees your presence as a personal insult to their manhood. She glanced at him. Which type dominates this base? Calloway was quiet for several steps, measuring his words. Master Sergeant Wade Kruger is Type 3, ma'am. He's been vocal about his opinions, says women don't belong in direct combat roles, that standards have been lowered, that it's only a matter of time before someone gets killed because we're more concerned with optics than operational readiness. And the men follow his lead. Most of them, ma'am. Kruger's been here 15 years, 4 deployments, Silver Star from the Battle of Nasiriyah 3 months ago. The men respect him. Calloway paused. He volunteered to be your demonstration partner for the training. That made Kira stop walking. She turned to face Calloway fully. He volunteered. Yes, ma'am. And Colonel Rourke approved this. Calloway's silence was answer enough. Kira felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not fear. She'd long ago made peace with fear. Learned to use it as fuel instead of letting it paralyze her. This was recognition, understanding. She was walking into a setup carefully orchestrated to put her in her place in front of 500 witnesses. Kruger wasn't volunteering to be a partner. He was volunteering to be an opponent. This wasn't going to be a training demonstration. It was going to be a public challenge, a test designed to prove that women couldn't hack it in the real Marines, that all the progress and all the policy changes were just window dressing on a fundamental truth. Combat was a man's world, and women were tourists. Lieutenant Calloway, Kira said quietly, when this goes sideways, and it will, I need you to make sure the medics are standing by. Can you do that? Calloway swallowed hard. Ma'am, maybe we should speak with Colonel Rourke first. If you think there's going to be the medics, Lieutenant, have them ready. Yes, ma'am. The training arena was an open concrete pad surrounded by tiered metal bleachers, the kind of space designed for large-scale physical training exercises and battalion formations. As Kira approached, she could see the bleachers already filling with Marines in desert camouflage, a sea of tan and brown that rippled with barely contained energy. The noise level was high, not quite a roar, but definitely louder than standard military discipline normally allowed during an official training event. Someone had let the leash out. Someone wanted this atmosphere. Colonel Garrett Rourke stood near the center of the arena floor, a tall man in his mid-50s with iron-gray hair and the ramrod posture of someone who'd spent his entire career in the infantry. Next to him stood Wade Kruger, and Kira sized him up in the 3 seconds it took to cross the final distance. 6'3", maybe 230 pounds, built like a fire hydrant with arms. Tattoos crawled up both forearms, the kind that told stories about deployments and brotherhood and nights that didn't make it into official reports. His stance was wide, his arms crossed, and his expression was the carefully neutral mask of someone who was absolutely certain he was about to win. Captain Stone, Rourke extended his hand, his smile professional but cold. Thank you for making the trip. We're honored to have such a distinguished operator here to share her expertise. Kira shook his hand and heard the subtext clearly. Honored, distinguished, expertise, all the right words, delivered with just enough emphasis to signal that he didn't entirely believe them, that this was a performance for the assembled battalion, a show of institutional support that would evaporate the moment she failed to meet expectations. She turned to Kruger and extended her hand. Master Sergeant. Kruger looked at her hand for a beat too long before taking it. His grip was crushing, the classic alpha male handshake designed to establish dominance before a word was even spoken. Kira let him squeeze, kept her face neutral, didn't reciprocate. She'd learned a long time ago that men like Kruger measured themselves by how much they could hurt you, how much you'd flinch. She didn't flinch. When he finally released her hand, she saw the flash of satisfaction in his eyes. First point to him, in his mind. "I've heard a lot about you, Captain," Kruger said, his voice carrying across the arena. Several Marines in the front rows leaned forward. "Looking forward to seeing what all the fuss is about." "Glad to be here, Sergeant." Rourke stepped forward, raising his voice to address the battalion. "Gentlemen, we have a unique opportunity today. Captain Kira Stone comes to us from Naval Special Warfare, where she's served as a SEAL sniper instructor for the past 6 years. She's here to demonstrate advanced close-quarters combat techniques that have been proven effective in the most demanding operational environments our nation faces." He paused, letting the words settle. "Master Sergeant Kruger has graciously volunteered to serve as Captain Stone's demonstration partner. I expect all of you to observe with the professionalism this training deserves." Rourke looked at Kira. "Captain, the floor is yours." Kira stepped forward as Rourke retreated to the sidelines. The noise in the bleachers died down to a murmur, but she could feel the skepticism radiating from the assembled Marines like heat from asphalt. She'd prepared remarks, a brief overview of the combat philosophy she'd developed over years of operational experience. But looking at Kruger's stance, at the barely concealed sneers in the front row, she made a snap decision. Words weren't going to change minds here. Only action would. "Thank you, Colonel Rourke." Her voice projected clearly across the arena without shouting, a skill she'd learned from instructors who understood that volume wasn't the same as authority. "I'm going to keep the talking to a minimum today. Master Sergeant Kruger and I are going to demonstrate some techniques, and then we'll open it up for questions and individual practice." She turned to Kruger. "Ready, Sergeant?" "Ready, ma'am." The honorific sounded like an insult the way he said it. Kira moved to the center of the mat, Kruger circling to face her. "First technique," she announced, "is a basic wrist release. Sergeant Kruger is going to grab my right wrist with his right hand, and I'm going to demonstrate the proper leverage point to break the grip." Kruger reached out and grabbed her wrist, but instead of the standard training grip, firm but not aggressive, he clamped down hard, his fingers digging into the pressure points around her radius bone. Kira saw the calculation in his eyes. He was testing her, seeing if she'd complain, if she'd ask him to ease up. If she did, he'd won before the demonstration even started. She didn't complain. She rotated her wrist sharply against his thumb, the weakest point of any grip, and stepped in close, using her body weight to amplify the leverage. His hand popped free, and she stepped back smoothly. The key is understanding that the thumb can't maintain the same grip strength as the four fingers combined. You attack the weak point, not the strong point. "Again," Kruger said, his voice tight. This time, when he grabbed her wrist, he adjusted his grip, compensating for the thumb weakness. Kira adapted instantly, using a different release that involved striking his forearm with her free hand while twisting free. The technique worked, but Kruger was already moving to grab her again, faster, more aggressive. "Sergeant," Kira said calmly, "this is a demonstration, not sparring. I'm just making sure the technique works under pressure, ma'am." His tone was respectful, but his eyes said something else entirely. Wouldn't want to teach the troops something that fails in a real situation. There it was, the challenge, delivered with just enough plausible deniability that calling him out would make her look weak. Kira heard the murmur from the bleachers, sensed the shift in energy. The battalion was leaning forward now, sensing blood in the water. She raised her voice to address the assembled Marines. "What we're going to see now is scenario-based training. Sergeant Kruger is going to attack me using whatever method he chooses, and I'm going to respond with appropriate force. This will demonstrate how these techniques adapt to unpredictable situations." She saw Kruger's smile, quick and vicious. She'd just given him permission to come at her for real, in front of 500 witnesses. In his mind, this was checkmate. He was going to put the female SEAL on her back, hard and fast, and the message would be clear to every Marine watching. Women don't belong here. "Whenever you're ready, Sergeant," Kira said, settling into her stance. Kruger didn't wait. He came in with a double-leg takedown, the classic wrestling move designed to drive an opponent to the ground through overwhelming force and momentum. It was fast, technical, and if it landed would put Kira flat on her back with 230 pounds on top of her. He was betting she didn't have the strength to stop it. He was wrong. Kira sprawled, her hips shooting back as she drove her weight down on top of his shoulders, stuffing the takedown. Her right arm looped over his neck. Her left hand grabbed his far wrist, and she spun to his side, using his own forward momentum to drag him past her and face first into the mat. The impact was loud enough to make Marines in the front row wince. Kruger rolled to his feet immediately, and Kira saw the flash of anger replace the confidence. He came again, this time with a jab-cross combination, followed by a low kick aimed at her lead leg. The strikes were real, no pulled punches, and the kick had weight behind it. Kira slipped the punches, let the kick graze her shin, and countered with a palm strike to his solar plexus that stopped him cold. "You're telegraphing," she said conversationally, loud enough for the battalion to hear. "Your shoulder dips before you throw the cross. In a real fight, that gets you killed." Kruger's face flushed red. He reset, and Kira could see him running calculations, trying to figure out how this was happening. He was bigger, stronger, had the reach advantage. By every metric he understood, he should be dominating. But something wasn't computing. "Come on, Sergeant," someone yelled from the bleachers. "Don't let her make you look soft." That did it. Kruger charged, and this time there was no technique, no strategy. It was pure aggression, a bull rush designed to drive her into the ground through sheer mass. Kira sidestepped, grabbed his outstretched arm, and used a basic judo throw to redirect his momentum. Kruger went airborne, hit the mat hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs with an audible whoosh. The arena went quiet. Kruger got to his feet slowly, and Kira could see the shift in his eyes. The confidence was gone, replaced by something darker. Desperation. He'd built his reputation on being the alpha, the toughest man in the room, and that identity was crumbling in front of 500 witnesses. Men like Kruger, when cornered, became dangerous. Not because they were skilled, but because they stopped caring about consequences. "Good effort, Sergeant," Kira said, offering him an out. "That's enough for the demonstration. Let's break down what we just—" "We're not done." Kruger's voice was flat, cold. "One more round, unless you're too tired." Kira felt the trap closing. If she stopped now, Kruger would spin it as her backing down, being unable to continue. If she continued, he was going to escalate, and someone was going to get hurt. She glanced at Colonel Rourke, but the colonel's face was carefully neutral. He wasn't going to intervene. This was her problem to solve. "All right, Sergeant," she said quietly. "One more round." Kruger circled, his breathing heavy, his fists clenched. Kira watched his feet, his shoulders, reading the micro movements that telegraphed intent. He was going to try something big, something designed to end the fight in one move. She just needed to identify what. He feinted with a jab, then exploded forward with a front kick aimed at her midsection. But at the last second, the kick changed trajectory, rising toward her ribs with the full power of his legs behind it. It was the kind of strike that could crack ribs, collapse a lung, end a fight decisively. It was also completely illegal for a training demonstration. Kruger's boot launched toward her ribs with brutal intent. Instead of retreating, Kira closed distance. Her training took over, left hand intercepting the ankle, right hand driving upward against the hyperextended knee joint. Leverage. Timing. 230 pounds of momentum turned against itself. The human knee is a masterpiece of engineering when it moves the way it's supposed to. When you force it the wrong way, with leverage and timing and 200 pounds of forward momentum behind it, it fails catastrophically. The crack was like a rifle shot in the sudden silence. Kruger's scream followed a heartbeat later, raw and animal, filled with a kind of pain that transcended ego or pride. He collapsed onto the concrete, his leg bent at an angle that made experienced combat veterans look away, and the sound that came from his throat was something primal, stripped of all the bravado and machismo that had filled the arena minutes before. Kira stood over him, her breathing steady, her expression calm. She released his leg carefully, lowering it to the mat as gently as the situation allowed, and straightened to her full height. 500 Marines stared at her in absolute silence. "Medic!" Kira called, her voice cutting through the shock. "We need a stretcher and immediate transport to base hospital." Two medics sprinted from the sidelines, their training overriding their shock. They knelt beside Kruger, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. One of them, a young woman with specialist insignia, looked up at Kira with wide eyes. "Ma'am, his knee is dislocated and probably fractured. A CL and MCL tears at minimum," Kira finished. "Possible ligament damage to the posterior cruciate. Stabilize it and get him to orthopedic surgery. Tell the surgeon they're looking at reconstructive work." The medics worked quickly, and within 90 seconds they had Kruger immobilized and loaded onto a stretcher. As they carried him past Kira, Kruger's eyes found hers, and she saw something there that wasn't quite hatred and wasn't quite respect. Recognition, maybe. The understanding that he'd made a critical miscalculation and paid the price. Kira turned to face the battalion, her voice carrying across the silent arena. "Lesson 1, she said. Underestimating your opponent gets you carried off on a stretcher. Lesson 2, the techniques I'm here to teach aren't party tricks. They're designed to disable and destroy quickly and efficiently because that's what combat requires." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the faces staring at her from the bleachers. Young men mostly, some scared now, some angry, some, a few, looking at her with something that might have been respect. "Anyone else want to volunteer for a demonstration?" Nobody moved. "Good." Kira walked to the edge of the mat, picked up her water bottle, and took a long drink. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. Inside, adrenaline was still coursing through her system. But years of combat operations had taught her how to compartmentalize, how to function under stress without letting it show. "We're going to take a 10-minute break while Sergeant Kruger receives the medical attention he needs. When we resume, we'll start with basic techniques, practice slowly and safely, because that's how professionals train. Clear?" "Yes, ma'am." The response was ragged but unanimous. As the battalion began to file out for the break, Lieutenant Calloway approached, his face pale. "Captain Stone, Jesus Christ, is he going to be okay?" "He'll recover," Kira said flatly. "Might take a year of physical therapy, but he'll walk again. Whether he'll pass the PT requirements to stay active duty is another question." She looked at Calloway directly. "That kick was designed to injure me seriously, Lieutenant. He wasn't playing. Neither was I." "I know, ma'am. Calloway trailed off, struggling for words. "You're wondering if I went too far." Kira screwed the cap back on her water bottle. "You're wondering if I could have stopped him without breaking his knee." "The thought crossed my mind, ma'am." Kira was quiet for a moment, watching the medics load Kruger into an ambulance on the far side of the arena. "Maybe I could have," she admitted. "Maybe I could have swept his leg, put him in a joint lock, ended it without permanent damage. But that would have left room for doubt. He would have told himself, and everyone else, that he was just having an off day. That in a real fight, he could take me." She turned to face Calloway. "The doubt would have festered. The resentment would have grown. And 6 months from now, or a year from now, we'd be back here having the same conversation. Except next time, someone might get killed." Kira started walking toward the exit. "I didn't break his knee because I wanted to, Lieutenant. I broke it because it was the only way to make the point that needs to be made. These men need to understand that gender doesn't determine capability. Skill does. Training does. Respect does." She paused at the doorway. "The message will spread, Lieutenant. By tonight, every Marine on this base will know that the female SEAL instructor broke Master Sergeant Kruger's knee in front of 500 witnesses. Some of them will be angry, some will be impressed, but all of them will know one thing for certain. She's not to be underestimated, and that's the only message that matters. Calloway fell into step beside her as they walked toward the command building. "Captain, do you think Colonel Rourke is going to file a report? Kruger could press charges, claim excessive force." "He could," Kira said, "but he won't, because that would require admitting that he attacked an instructor during a training demonstration with intent to cause serious injury, and that the instructor defended herself successfully. That story doesn't end well for Kruger's career, even if the injury wasn't his fault." She glanced at Calloway. "Pride is a funny thing, Lieutenant. Sometimes it makes men do stupid things, and sometimes it's the only thing that keeps them from doing even stupider things." They reached the command building, and Kira stopped. She could see Colonel Rourke through the windows, standing in his office with two people in civilian clothes. Judge Advocate General officers, most likely. The hammer was about to fall. "Captain Stone," the voice came from behind her, gravelly and familiar. A voice she hadn't heard in 5 years but would recognize anywhere. Kira turned, and there he was. Gunnery Sergeant Declan Maddox, 62 years old, wearing civilian clothes but standing with the posture of a man who'd spent 40 years in uniform. His hair was white now, his face more lined than she remembered, but his eyes were the same, sharp, assessing, missing nothing. "Gunny," Kira said, and couldn't keep the surprise out of her voice. "What are you doing here?" Maddox looked past her at the training arena, where the last of the Marines were filing out. "I heard you were coming to Pendleton. Thought I'd pay my respects to my favorite student." His gaze came back to her. "Saw the demonstration. Nice work on that knee break. Textbook application of force against an attacking joint." "You taught me well, Gunny." "I taught you how to survive," Maddox corrected. "You taught yourself how to win." He nodded toward the command building. "You're going to need that lesson in the next few days, Captain. Because what you just did out there, that wasn't just breaking one man's knee. You just declared war on a system that's been protecting bastards like Kruger for longer than you've been alive." Kira felt ice settle in her stomach. "What are you talking about?" Maddox pulled a manila folder from inside his jacket. "Let's take a walk, Stone. There are some things you need to know about Master Sergeant Wade Kruger, and about the officers who've been covering for him for the past 15 years. They walked in silence to the parking lot, where Maddox's old pickup truck sat baking in the afternoon sun. He opened the passenger door and pulled out a cardboard box, setting it on the hood. "5 years ago, I tried to investigate Kruger," Maddox said, opening the box. 3 female Marines had been transferred off Pendleton in a 6-month period, all after filing harassment complaints. I thought it was suspicious. Started asking questions." He pulled out files, spreading them across the hood. "Colonel Rourke, Major Rourke, back then, shut me down. Told me I was creating problems where none existed. Told me if I kept pushing, I'd find myself retired whether I wanted to be or not." Maddox looked at Kira, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Pain, old and deep. "I kept pushing, and in 1998, I found myself retired. Honorable discharge, full pension, but retired nonetheless." Kira looked at the files. Names, dates, complaint forms. "How many women, Gunny?" 12 that I could document, probably more that never reported." Maddox's jaw tightened. "One of them was my goddaughter, Sergeant Bryn Sullivan, 28 years old, best damn Marine I ever trained." He pulled out a photo, a young woman in dress blues, smiling, confident, alive. "Bryn filed a complaint against Kruger in 95. 14 pages, detailed, with physical evidence. Rourke ordered a psychiatric evaluation. The base psychiatrist diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder. She was administratively discharged within 30 days. Maddox's voice cracked slightly. "She killed herself 6 months later. Pills and alcohol. Left a note saying she couldn't live with the shame of being called unstable, of having her service questioned, of being thrown away like garbage. Kira felt fury building in her chest, hot and clean. Rourke knew. Rourke knew. His predecessors knew. The whole chain of command knew, Stone. They've been protecting Kruger for 15 years because his daddy was a general officer. Because it was easier to transfer the women than deal with the problem. Because maintaining unit cohesion was more important than justice. Maddox started gathering the files back into the box. I've spent 5 years compiling this evidence, waiting for the right moment, the right catalyst. He looked at Kira. You breaking Kruger's knee in front of 500 Marines? That's the catalyst I've been waiting for. What do you need from me, Gunny? I need you to not back down, not apologize, not let them bury this like they buried everything else. Maddox's eyes were fierce. They're going to come after you, Stone. JAG investigation, media pressure, maybe even criminal charges. They're going to try to make you the villain in this story. Can you handle that? Kira thought about Bryn Sullivan, about the 12 other women in those files, about how many more there might be, silent and suffering, convinced that speaking up would only destroy them. I can handle it, Gunny. Good, Maddox handed her the box. Then let's go to war. They were interrupted by Lieutenant Calloway, running across the parking lot. Captain Stone, Colonel Rourke wants to see you in his office. Now. And there are JAG officers with him. Kira looked at Maddox, who nodded. She took the box, feeling its weight in her arms. Evidence. Truth. Justice delayed, but not denied. Let's see what the colonel has to say, she said. Colonel Rourke's office was exactly what Kira expected. Spartan, military, decorated with the symbols of a career spent climbing the ranks. Unit patches, deployment photos, commendations framed on the walls. Everything in its place, everything controlled. The 2 JAG officers stood by the window, Major Helen Lancaster and Captain Roland Bishop, both in service dress, both watching her with professional assessment. Captain Stone, Rourke didn't stand. These officers are from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. Major Lancaster and Captain Bishop, they have some questions about today's incident. Kira remained standing, the box of files still in her arms. Of course, sir. Major Lancaster spoke first. Captain, I've reviewed footage of the incident from multiple angles. I've also spoken with several witnesses. I need you to walk me through your decision-making process when you applied the technique that resulted in Master Sergeant Kruger's injury. Which part, ma'am? Kira kept her voice level. The decision to defend myself against an attack, or the decision to use sufficient force to neutralize the threat. Lancaster's expression didn't change. Let's start with your assessment of the threat level. Did you believe Master Sergeant Kruger intended to cause you serious bodily harm? Yes, ma'am. His kick was aimed at my rib cage with full power. A strike of that nature can fracture ribs, puncture a lung, cause internal bleeding. I assessed it as a scenario requiring immediate defensive action, and I responded accordingly. Captain Bishop leaned forward. Master Sergeant Kruger claims he was pulling the kick, that it was never intended to make full contact, and that you responded with excessive force. Kira looked Bishop in the eye. Master Sergeant Kruger is lying, sir. The silence in the room was absolute. That's a serious accusation, Captain, Lancaster said quietly. It's a serious lie, ma'am. Kira set the box down on Rourke's desk. I've been in enough fights to know the difference between a pulled strike and a committed one. Kruger committed. He put his full weight into that kick, telegraphed his intent with his footwork, and followed through past the point of control. He wanted to hurt me. He just didn't expect me to be capable of stopping him. Rourke's face was stone. Captain Stone, these are serious allegations you're making about a decorated NCO. With all due respect, sir, I'm making serious allegations about a serial predator who's been protected by this command for 15 years. Kira tapped the box. And I have the evidence to prove it. She pulled out the top file and opened it on the desk. Private Claire Donovan, 1988, filed a harassment complaint against then Sergeant Kruger. Complaint dismissed by then Captain Garrett Rourke as a misunderstanding. Donovan transferred to Camp Lejeune within 72 hours. Another file. Sergeant Bryn Sullivan, 1995, filed a 14-page complaint with physical evidence against Master Sergeant Kruger. Major Rourke ordered a psychiatric evaluation. Sullivan was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and administratively discharged. She committed suicide 6 months later. Kira looked directly at Rourke. "Want me to continue, sir? Because I have 10 more just like these." Colonel Rourke stood slowly, his face dark with anger. "Where did you get those files?" "Does it matter, sir? The question is why they were buried instead of investigated." "Captain Stone," Major Lancaster interrupted, her voice sharp, "you're making extremely serious allegations against your commanding officer." "I'm presenting evidence of a systematic cover-up that's been ongoing for 15 years, Kira corrected. Evidence that Master Sergeant Kruger has a documented history of assaulting female Marines. Evidence that Colonel Rourke and his predecessors have consistently buried those complaints to protect Kruger and themselves. She turned back to Rourke. "Sir, you want to investigate me for excessive force? Fine. But I'm going to make damn sure that investigation includes every complaint, every transfer, every woman who was silenced because it was easier than holding Kruger accountable." The office fell silent. Through the windows, Kira could see the sun starting to set over Camp Pendleton, turning the sky orange and gold. Finally, Major Lancaster spoke. "Captain Stone, you're confined to quarters pending further investigation. You're not to speak with media or post on social media about this incident. Violations will be considered insubordination. Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "Colonel Rourke, we're going to need access to personnel files going back to 1988. Every harassment complaint filed at this installation and every decision made regarding those complaints." Rourke's face was ashen. "Major, I don't have the authority to—" "You do now, sir. This is a formal Judge Advocate General investigation into potential misconduct and obstruction of justice. We'll have the necessary authorizations by morning." Lancaster looked at Kira. "Captain, you're dismissed. Remain available for questioning." Kira gathered the box of files and left, Gunny Maddox waiting for her in the hallway. "How bad?" Maddox asked quietly. "They confined me to quarters, ordered me not to talk to media." Kira smiled without humor. "They think they can control this, bury it quietly like they buried everything else. Can they?" "Not anymore, Gunny." Kira looked at the box in her arms. "Not after what we just put on Rourke's desk." Lancaster seemed genuinely shocked. Bishop, too. "I don't think they knew about the history." "What happens now?" Kira thought about that. "Now the system tries to protect itself. JAG will investigate, but slowly, carefully, looking for ways to minimize damage. Rourke will lawyer up. Kruger will play the wounded warrior, and I'll be the villain who used excessive force against a decorated combat veteran." She started walking toward her temporary quarters. "But we have one thing they don't, Gunny. We have the truth. And truth has a way of getting out, no matter how hard people try to bury it." Her phone buzzed. A news alert. "Female Navy SEAL under investigation after injuring Marine Sergeant during training exercise." The video was already going viral. 2 million views in 4 hours. Another buzz. A text from her daughter Harper. "Mom, what's happening? The news is saying terrible things about you. Please call me." Kira dialed. Harper picked up on the first ring, her voice tight with fear. "Mom? Are you okay? They're saying you attacked someone." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Listen to me. You're going to hear a lot of things over the next few days. Some of them will be true, some won't be. But I need you to know that I did what I had to do. I protected myself, and in doing so, I protected a lot of other people who couldn't protect themselves." "I don't understand." "You will," Kira said softly. "Soon. But right now I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? I'll try, Mom. That's my girl. I love you. I love you too. Kira ended the call and stood in the gathering darkness, watching the last light fade from the California sky. Somewhere in a hospital, Wade Kruger was in surgery, his knee being reconstructed, his career effectively over. Somewhere in the command building, Colonel Rourke was making phone calls, trying to manage a crisis that was spiraling beyond his control. And somewhere out there, 12 women were watching the news, seeing their abuser finally face consequences, wondering if it was safe to speak up after years of silence. Gunny Maddox appeared beside her. "It's just beginning, Stone." "I know, Gunny. They're going to come at you hard. Make this about you, not about Kruger, not about the system that protected him." "Let them try." Kira looked at the old warrior beside her, this man who'd lost his goddaughter to a broken system, who'd spent 5 years building a case nobody wanted to hear. "We've got the truth, we've got the evidence, and we've got something they don't." "What's that?" "Nothing left to lose." Maddox smiled in the darkness. "Then let's make it count." The call came at 0600 hours, pulling Kira from a sleep that hadn't really been sleep. She'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling of her temporary quarters, replaying the moment Kruger's knee shattered, wondering if she could have done it differently, wondering if she should have. The answer was always the same. No. "Captain Stone." The voice on the other end was crisp, female, unfamiliar. "This is Corporal Bethany Walsh. I need to speak with you, in person. It's about Master Sergeant Kruger." Kira sat up, instantly alert. "Go ahead, Corporal." "Not over the phone, ma'am. Can you meet me at the base chapel in 30 minutes? "I'm confined to quarters, Corporal." A pause. "Please, ma'am, this is important. I'll take responsibility if anyone asks." Something in the woman's voice, desperation mixed with determination, made Kira's decision. 30 minutes. The chapel was empty at this hour, light filtering through stained glass windows and painting the pews in shades of amber and blue. Corporal Bethany Walsh sat in the front row, her blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She stood when Kira entered, came to attention. 26 years old, maybe. Irish heritage written in the bone structure and the pale skin that burned easily under the California sun. "At ease, Corporal." Kira sat down beside her. "What's this about?" Walsh didn't sit. She stood there, rigid, fighting some internal battle. When she finally spoke, the words came fast, tumbling over each other like she was afraid if she stopped, she'd never start again. 3 years ago, Master Sergeant Kruger cornered me in the equipment storage facility, after hours. Said he wanted to discuss my performance evaluations. Walsh's voice cracked slightly. He tried to kiss me. When I pushed him away, he grabbed my wrist, twisted it, told me I was making a mistake, that he could make my career or break it. Kira felt cold fury settle in her chest. "Did you report it?" "I filed an official complaint the next day." Walsh finally sat down, her body collapsing like a puppet with cut strings. "My squad leader took the report to his chain of command. 2 days later, Colonel Rourke called me into his office, told me that Master Sergeant Kruger was a decorated NCO with an impeccable record, that I was a young Marine who maybe misunderstood his mentorship style, that if I pursued the complaint, it would damage unit cohesion and probably destroy my career. "What did you do?" "I withdrew the complaint." Walsh looked at her hands. "What else could I do? I was 23 years old, a nobody, and Kruger he was untouchable." "Corporal Walsh, why are you telling me this now?" Walsh raised her head, and Kira saw tears streaming down her face. "Because I watched you break his knee yesterday. I watched you stand over him while he screamed, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like maybe someone was finally going to hold him accountable." She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. "I'm not the only one. There are 6 other women I know about, women who filed complaints, women who were transferred or forced out or told to keep quiet. We talk sometimes, quietly, wondering if anyone would ever believe us. Kira took the paper. 6 names, 6 stories waiting to be told. Ma'am, I need to know, are you going to fight this? Or are they going to bury you like they buried all of us? Kira thought about Gunny Maddox's files, about Bryn Sullivan, dead at 28, about a system so broken it sacrificed the vulnerable to protect the powerful. I'm going to fight, Corporal, and I'm going to win, but I need you to do something for me. Anything, ma'am. I need you to file another complaint, official, on the record, everything that happened 3 years ago, everything Rourke said to you. Don't leave anything out. Walsh paled. Ma'am, they'll crucify me. They'll try, Kira interrupted, but this time you won't be alone. This time there's a Judge Advocate General investigation already underway. This time the spotlight is too bright for them to hide in the shadows. She put her hand on Walsh's shoulder. Bethany, I know I'm asking you to be brave. I know this could cost you. But if we don't stand up now, if we let them bury this again, how many more women will Kruger hurt? How many more Bryns will we lose? Walsh was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened, wiped her eyes, and nodded. I'll file the statement today, ma'am. Thank you, Corporal. You're a better Marine than Kruger ever was. After Walsh left, Kira sat alone in the chapel, looking at the 6 names on the paper. 6 lives disrupted, 6 voices silenced. And these were just the ones Walsh knew about. Her phone buzzed. Gunny Maddox. Turn on the news. Now. Kira pulled up CNN on her phone. The headline made her stomach drop. Female Navy SEAL under investigation after violent confrontation with decorated Marine sergeant. The footage played, grainy cell phone video from one of the Marines in the bleachers. The angle was bad, the sound worse, but the image was clear enough. Kira catching Kruger's leg, the technique, the crack, Kruger screaming, Kira standing over him, face cold, emotionless. Out of context, without understanding what led to that moment, it looked brutal. It looked excessive. The anchor continued. Master Sergeant Wade Kruger, a Silver Star recipient who served with distinction in Iraq, remains hospitalized with severe knee damage. Sources say he may never walk without assistance again. Captain Kira Stone has been confined to quarters, pending a military investigation into possible excessive use of force. Kira's phone rang. Her ex-husband, Owen. Have you lost your mind? Owen didn't wait for pleasantries. You broke a man's leg on camera, Kira. On camera. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to you? To Harper? Owen. I'm watching you destroy your career in real time. For what? To prove some point about how tough you are? To protect women who can't protect themselves, Kira said quietly. To hold a predator accountable. To change a system that's been broken for decades. By breaking a man's knee. He attacked me first, Owen, with intent to seriously injure. I defended myself. The media doesn't care about that. The public doesn't care about that. All they see is a woman beating up a war hero. Owen's voice softened slightly. Kira, walk away. Take whatever deal Jag offers you. Retire quietly. Think about Harper. I am thinking about Harper. I'm thinking about the world I want her to grow up in. One where women don't have to choose between their safety and their careers. You're going to lose everything. Maybe, Kira said, but some things are worth losing everything for. She ended the call and found Gunny Maddox waiting outside the chapel. Saw the news, he said. They're painting me as the aggressor. Of course they are. It's easier than admitting the system failed. Maddox pulled out his truck keys. Come on, there's someone you need to meet. They drove in silence through the morning traffic, heading north toward Oceanside. Maddox's house was a small ranch-style home 3 miles from the base, the kind of place a career Marine buys when he finally hangs up his uniform and tries to figure out what civilian life means. Inside, a woman was waiting, mid-40s, with the bearing of someone who'd spent years in positions of authority. She stood when they entered, and Kira recognized the look in her eyes. The particular 1,000-yard stare that came from combat experience. Major Sienna Blackwood, the woman said, extending her hand, retired, or maybe I should say, forced out. They sat at Maddox's kitchen table, and Blackwood told her story. 1994. I was a captain, one of the first female combat pilots in the Marine Corps. Distinguished record in Desert Storm, fast-tracked for promotion. Blackwood's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. Wade Kruger was a staff sergeant then. He cornered me in the base gym after hours, tried to force himself on me. She pulled a small tape recorder from her purse. I fought him off, filed an official complaint the next morning with then Major Garrett Rourke. And this is what happened. Blackwood pressed play. The recording was old, the audio quality poor, but the voices were clear enough. A younger Rourke, his tone threatening. Captain Blackwood, I strongly advise you to reconsider this complaint. Staff Sergeant Kruger comes from an important family. His father is Brigadier General Marcus Kruger. You're a female officer in a male-dominated field. How do you think this looks? Blackwood's voice, younger but firm. I don't need protection, sir. I need justice. Rourke, what you need is to think about your career, because if you push this, I'll have no choice but to question your judgment, your fitness for command. And I have colleagues who will back me up. Is one incident really worth destroying everything you've worked for? The recording ended. I withdrew the complaint, Blackwood said quietly. Took voluntary retirement in '95. Couldn't stomach staying in an institution that valued a predator's daddy's reputation more than my safety. She looked at Kira with fierce eyes. I've been waiting 9 years for this moment, Captain. 9 years for someone to finally make these bastards pay. Tell me what you need from me. I need you to go on the record. Official statement to JAG. Everything that happened. Everything Rourke said. Done. After Blackwood left to file her statement, Maddox made coffee and they sat in silence for several minutes. How many, Gunny? Kira finally asked. How many women has Kruger hurt? 12 that I documented. Walsh makes 13. Probably more who never reported. Maddox stared into his coffee. Bryn was the one that broke me, my goddaughter. And the system chewed her up and spit her out because it was easier than holding one man accountable. Tell me about her. Maddox pulled out a photo album. Bryn Sullivan in dress blues, eyes bright with pride. Bryn at 20, graduating from boot camp. Bryn at 28, 3 months before she died, the light already fading from her eyes. March '95, 14-page complaint, physical evidence, everything documented. Maddox's voice cracked. Didn't matter. Rourke ordered psych eval. 30 days later, she was discharged, diagnosed with borderline personality disorder by a psychiatrist who golfed with Rourke every weekend. He closed the album. She came to me for help. I tried every door, every officer. They all said the same thing, don't make waves. 6 months later, she took pills and alcohol, left a note saying she couldn't live with being called unstable. That's when you started investigating. That's when I declared war on a system that murdered my goddaughter as surely as if they'd put a gun to her head. Maddox looked at Kira. I pushed too hard, too fast. In '98, I found myself retired, but I never stopped building this case. You breaking Kruger's knee? That's the opening shot in a war these bastards never saw coming. Kira's phone buzzed. Lieutenant Calloway. Ma'am, you need to see this. Washington Post just broke a story. Kira pulled up the article on her phone. The headline hit her like a fist. AMP Pendleton officials systematically dismissed sexual harassment complaints for 15 years. She read fast, her pulse accelerating with each paragraph. Someone had leaked everything: complaint forms, email chains, transfer orders, psychiatric evaluations. The article detailed 19 separate incidents involving Kruger and female Marines. 19, not 12, not 13, 19. Every single complaint dismissed or downgraded. 3 different company commanders had received complaints. 2 battalion commanders had been briefed, and in every case, the decision was the same: insufficient evidence, personality conflict, female Marine being oversensitive. "Gunny, did you leak this?" Maddox shook his head. "Not me, but someone high up wants this story public. Wants the pressure so intense they have no choice but to make systemic changes." The article cited multiple officials with direct knowledge of the cover-up. Someone was feeding information to the media. Kira's phone rang. A Washington, D.C. area code. "Captain Stone, this is Senator Victoria Ashford, Senate Armed Services Committee. We need to talk." Kira stepped outside, into Maddox's backyard, where California sunshine made everything look deceptive. "Senator, I've been reviewing documents regarding the situation at Camp Pendleton, documents that paint a very disturbing picture of institutional failure." Ashford's voice was cultured, East Coast aristocracy, but hard underneath. "I'm convening emergency hearings. You'll be asked to testify." "Ma'am, I'm currently under JAG investigation." "I'm aware. The investigation will continue, but Congress has oversight authority, Captain. And what I'm seeing suggests this goes far beyond one training incident. This is about a culture of silence that's existed in the Marine Corps for decades." Ashford paused. "My son died in Desert Storm. Friendly fire. I've spent 30 years in the Senate trying to make sure our military takes care of its people. What happened to you? What happened to those 19 women? That's a failure of leadership at the highest levels, and I intend to expose it. What do you need from me, Senator?" "The truth. All of it. No matter who it implicates." After the call ended, Kira stood in the sunshine, watching Maddox through the window. The old warrior who'd lost his goddaughter to a broken system, who'd spent 5 years building a case nobody wanted to hear. Her phone buzzed again. "Harper. Mom, kids at school are saying horrible things, that you're violent, that you attack someone. I told them they're wrong, but..." Kira called her daughter. Harper picked up immediately. "Mom? I need to tell you something, sweetheart, and I need you to really hear me." "Okay. Over the next few weeks, you're going to hear a lot of stories about me. Some will say I'm a hero. Some will say I'm a villain. The truth is probably somewhere in between." Kira chose her words carefully. "But here's what I want you to know. I defended myself against someone who tried to hurt me, and in doing so, I exposed a system that's been hurting women for a very long time. The news says you broke his leg." "I did. He kicked at my ribs with full force. I stopped him the only way I could." Harper was quiet for a moment. "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Kira admitted. "But being scared doesn't mean you don't act. Sometimes being scared means you have to act, because if you don't, the fear wins." "I'm proud of you, Mom." Kira felt her throat tighten. "I'm proud of you too, baby." After she hung up, Maddox appeared beside her. "The Post article is going nuclear," he said. 3 million shares in 2 hours. Every major news outlet is picking it up. This is the story now. 19 women, Gunny. Where did the other 7 come from? Women who were too scared to come forward before, who saw what happened to you, saw you fight back and win, and decided maybe it was finally safe to speak up." Maddox handed her his phone. An email inbox filling in real time. Subject lines all variations of the same theme. "I was one of Kruger's victims. He attacked me in 2001. I need to tell my story." 7 new women. 7 voices that had been silent for years, suddenly finding the courage to speak. "They're calling it a reckoning," Maddox said. "Social media is exploding. You've become a symbol, whether you wanted to be or not." Kira scrolled through the emails, reading fragments of stories, each one a variation of the same nightmare. Kruger cornering them. Kruger making advances. Kruger using his authority to intimidate and control. And when they reported it, the system protecting him and punishing them. Her phone rang again. Major Lancaster. "Captain Stone, I need you to report to my office immediately. We have new information that changes the scope of this investigation. Lancaster's temporary office at Camp Pendleton was Spartan, a borrowed conference room with a folding table and uncomfortable chairs. Captain Bishop stood by the window, and sitting at the table was a woman Kira didn't recognize. Lieutenant Commander Vivian Cross, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Captain Stone, sit down. Lancaster's voice was tight. We've uncovered something that changes everything. Cross slid a document across the table. Top secret classification. A memorandum dated March 1995. From Brigadier General Marcus Kruger, retired, to Major Garrett Rourke. Subject, Sullivan Matter, Command Guidance. Kira read in growing horror. Major Rourke, suppress Sullivan complaint immediately. My son's career cannot be jeopardized by one unstable female Marine. I don't care what evidence she claims to have. You will order psychiatric evaluation, recommend administrative discharge, and ensure this matter goes no further. This is not a request. This is direct guidance from flag rank. My son has a bright future in the Corps. I will not allow it to be derailed by someone who can't handle the demands of military service. Comply or face consequences to your own advancement. Brigadier General M. Kruger. The room was silent. Where did you get this? Kira finally asked. Anonymous tip to NCIS, Cross said. Arrived this morning. We verified authenticity. General Kruger's signature matches records. The memo was typed on his personal letterhead. So Rourke was following orders, Bishop said, from a flag officer. Retired flag officer, Lancaster corrected. General Kruger had no official authority in '95, but he had connections, influence, and he was using both to protect his son. Kira looked at the memo again. Bryn Sullivan. She was the one who killed herself. We know, Lancaster said quietly. This isn't just about Camp Pendleton anymore. This is about a general officer using his position to obstruct justice. About multiple field-grade officers participating in a conspiracy to suppress criminal complaints. Lancaster leaned forward. Captain Stone, the investigation into your conduct is effectively closed. You acted in lawful self-defense, but we need your cooperation for a much larger investigation. Into what? Into everyone who enabled Wade Kruger, everyone who buried complaints, everyone who transferred victims instead of prosecuting the perpetrator. Lancaster's eyes were hard. We need you to testify, publicly, at the Congressional hearings, against my commanding officer, against anyone who violated their oath to protect the Marines under their command. Lancaster paused. I'm not going to lie to you, Captain. This is going to make you enemies, powerful ones. Your career will never be the same. Kira thought about Bryn Sullivan, about 19 women whose complaints were dismissed. I'll testify, she said, whatever you need. 3 days passed in a blur of depositions and interviews. The story metastasized beyond anything Kira had anticipated. Not just Camp Pendleton. Reports started coming in from other Marine installations. Camp Lejeune, Paris Island, Quantico. Women who'd been silent for years, suddenly finding the courage to speak. The pattern was always the same. Senior NCO abuses authority. Female Marine reports it. Command buries the complaint. Woman is transferred, discharged, or forced out. 47 women, 8 different perpetrators, 15 officers who'd systematically covered up complaints. The Marine Corps was hemorrhaging credibility. The Commandant made a statement about zero tolerance. The Secretary of Defense ordered an independent investigation. Congress demanded hearings, and through it all, Wade Kruger remained hospitalized, his attorney filing motions and giving interviews about how his client was being railroaded. Kira was in Maddox's kitchen when Lieutenant Calloway called with the news. Ma'am, Kruger checked himself out of rehabilitation this morning against medical advice. His attorney says he's planning to attend the Congressional hearing in person, that he wants to confront you directly. Kira felt ice in her veins. Kruger was desperate, making moves that didn't make tactical sense. He was going to show up on crutches, maybe in a wheelchair, play the wounded warrior for the cameras. "Let him come," she said. The night before the hearing, Kira sat in Maddox's living room, reviewing her testimony with attorneys from the Department of Defense. Every word was vetted, every claim supported by documentation. Maddox appeared in the doorway. "Stone, there's someone here to see you." Bethany Walsh stood in the hallway, no longer in uniform, civilian clothes, discharge papers in her hand. "They forced me out," she said without preamble. "Medical retirement, post-traumatic stress disorder from the Kruger assault. Happened so fast I didn't even have time to fight it." Kira felt rage building. "When?" "Orders came through this afternoon. I'm officially separated as of tomorrow morning." Walsh's voice was hollow. 3 years of exemplary service, gone, because I told the truth." "Who signed the orders?" "Colonel Rourke, his last official act before he was placed on administrative leave." Kira pulled out her phone and called Major Lancaster. "Major, we have a problem. Corporal Walsh just received discharge papers, signed by Rourke." "That son of a bitch." Lancaster's voice was tight with fury. "He's retaliating against a witness. That's obstruction of justice. I'll have the orders reversed by morning." But the damage was done. Walsh wasn't the only one. 2 other women who'd filed statements received threatening letters that night. Anonymous, graphic, detailed threats about what would happen if they testified. Someone was trying to intimidate witnesses. Maddox and Kira worked through the night, tracing the leak. Email logs, access records, security footage. A forwarded email from Colonel Rourke's office to an external address. Sent the day after the JAG investigation began. Subject: witness list, confidential. The email contained names of all the women who'd filed statements, their duty stations, their contact information. "Who has access to Rourke's email?" Kira asked. Calloway checked the access logs. "Only 3 people. Rourke himself, his executive officer, Major Thomas Brennan, and his administrative assistant." "Brennan." Kira felt pieces clicking together. "Any relation to Wade Kruger?" Calloway's face went pale. "Major Thomas Brennan is Wade Kruger's cousin. They grew up together, both sons of Marine officers. The conspiracy went deeper than they'd thought. Not just protecting one predator, protecting a network, a family dynasty." "We need to tell everyone." Kira pulled out her phone and called Senator Ashford directly. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Kira arrived at the Capitol building at dawn, the marble steps already crowded with media, protesters, supporters. Inside, the hearing room was packed. Senate Armed Services Committee, full attendance. Cameras, reporters. And in the front row of the public gallery, 13 women. The survivors: Bethany Walsh, Sienna Blackwood, and 11 others. Gunny Maddox sat in the back row, wearing his dress blues for the first time in 5 years. Kira caught his eye, and he nodded once. And across the aisle, separated by a center corridor, sat Wade Kruger in a wheelchair, his leg in a cast, his attorney Franklin Cross beside him. Their eyes met, and Kruger smiled. Cold, confident. Senator Victoria Ashford called the hearing to order. "This committee will come to order. We are here to investigate serious allegations of systemic failures in the United States Marine Corps' handling of sexual harassment and assault complaints. Captain Kira Stone, please rise and be sworn in." Kira stood, raised her right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do." "Please be seated." Ashford looked at Kira with eyes that had seen 3 decades of military scandals. "Captain Stone, before we begin our inquiry, I want to ask you one question that I think gets to the heart of why we're all here." The room went silent. "In your 13 years of military service, have you ever regretted being a woman in combat?" Kira thought about every door that had been closed to her, every team that doubted her, every room that didn't want her. "Not once, Senator," she said, her voice clear and strong. Not for a single second, and I never will. The gallery erupted in applause. Ashford banged her gavel, but she was smiling. Then let's proceed. Kira's voice carried across the hearing room with the precision of someone who'd spent years briefing combat operations. No emotion, no theatrics, just facts. I arrived at Camp Pendleton on August 11, 2003, to conduct advanced close-quarters combat training for 500 Marines. Master Sergeant Wade Kruger volunteered to be my demonstration partner. During the session, he escalated from cooperative training to aggressive confrontation. She paused, making eye contact with each senator. His final attack was a full-power kick aimed at my ribcage, delivered with clear intent to cause serious injury. I defended myself using a technique designed to neutralize the threat. That technique resulted in damage to his knee joint. Representative Marcus Thornton from Alabama leaned forward. Captain Stone, you're a highly trained special operator. Are you telling this committee that breaking a man's leg was the only option available to you? I'm telling this committee, Congressman, that when someone attacks you with lethal force, you respond with whatever force is necessary to stop the threat immediately. That's what I was trained to do in combat. That's what I did at Camp Pendleton. Lethal force. Thornton seized on the words. You're characterizing a training exercise as a lethal force scenario. I'm characterizing a 230-pound man throwing a full-power kick at my rib cage as a lethal force scenario, sir. The location doesn't change the physics. A kick of that magnitude can fracture ribs, puncture a lung, cause internal hemorrhaging. Franklin Cross, Kruger's attorney, stood up. Mr. Chairman, if I may interject, my client has a very different recollection of these events. Senator Ashford nodded. Master Sergeant Kruger, you're recognized. Kruger wheeled himself forward slightly, his face arranged in wounded dignity. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the wheelchair and the cast. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kruger began, I want to state clearly that I never intended to harm Captain Stone. The kick she's referring to was a controlled demonstration strike, pulled at the last moment. I've executed that same technique hundreds of times in training without incident. He paused. What happened was that Captain Stone overreacted, applying excessive force to what was meant to be a teaching moment. You're lying. The words cut through the room. Every head turned to Kira. The chamber erupted, Ashford's gavel banging repeatedly. Order! Captain Stone, you will refrain from outbursts or you will be held in contempt of Congress. With respect, Senator, I'm stating a fact. Kira pulled a tablet from her briefcase. Master Sergeant Kruger is lying under oath, and I can prove it. She tapped the screen, and video began playing on monitors throughout the hearing room. Multiple angles, synchronized, cell phone footage, security camera footage, each showing the same sequence. This footage shows Master Sergeant Kruger's strike was fully committed, not pulled. You can see his hip rotation, complete follow-through. His supporting leg, fully extended for maximum power transfer. His facial expression focused on impact, not on controlling the strike. Kira advanced the video frame by frame. I have expert analysis from 3 senior combat instructors who reviewed this footage. All 3 confirm that Kruger's technique shows full commitment and intent to make contact with maximum force. Cross's face went pale. Mr. Chairman, this is the first we're hearing of any such evidence. That's because it was compiled by the Department of Defense Inspector General's office, Major Lancaster said, standing from the gallery, and it's now being entered into the Congressional record as Exhibits A through J. Senator Ashford scanned the documents. Her expression darkened with each page. Master Sergeant Kruger, did you or did you not tell multiple Marines before the demonstration that you intended to put the female SEAL in her place? Kruger's jaw worked. I may have made some offhand comments. Yes or no, Sergeant? Cross grabbed Kruger's shoulder. Don't answer that. I'm advising my client to invoke his Fifth Amendment rights. But Kruger shook off his lawyer's hand. The rage that had been building behind his facade finally broke through. Yes, I said it, but it was taken out of context. She came onto my base, acting like she was better than men who bled for this corps. While you earned yours through assaulting women under your command? Representative Sarah Kimball's voice cut like ice. Sergeant Kruger, are you aware that this committee has received sworn testimony from 19 women detailing your pattern of sexual harassment and assault spanning 15 years? The room went silent. Every camera focused on Kruger's face. Those complaints were investigated and dismissed, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. They were buried, Kimball corrected, holding up papers. 19 official complaints filed between 1988 and 2003. 19 separate women who had no contact with each other, all describing the same pattern of behavior. She began reading. Private Claire Donovan, 1988. Sergeant Kruger cornered me during night training, attempted to kiss me, grabbed my wrist when I refused. Complaint dismissed as misunderstanding. Donovan transferred within 72 hours. Another page. Corporal Alexa Brennan, 2001. Master Sergeant Kruger used training exercises as opportunity for inappropriate contact, made comments about my body, suggested I could advance faster if I was friendlier. Complaint dismissed. Brennan transferred. Another. Sergeant Bryn Sullivan, 1995. Master Sergeant Kruger assaulted me in the base gymnasium. When I fought him off, he told me I'd regret refusing him, that he had friends in high places. Complaint resulted in psychiatric evaluation. Sullivan diagnosed with personality disorder. Administratively discharged. Committed suicide 6 months later. Kimball's voice cracked on the last sentence. She looked directly at Kruger. Explain these, Sergeant. Explain how 19 different women, over 15 years, all independently came to the same false conclusions about your behavior. Kruger stared at his hands, his shoulders slumping. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. It was just how things were done. The other guys did it too. Nobody ever said it was a problem. Nobody said it was a problem because the women who tried to report you were silenced. Kira's voice was quiet but carried. Because the system protected you and punished them. Because for 15 years, you operated in an environment that enabled your behavior and made it impossible for your victims to get justice. Kruger looked up at her, and for the first time she saw something other than anger. Shame. Real, profound shame. I never thought of it that way, he said. I just thought they were being too sensitive, that they couldn't handle the core. That's what every predator tells himself, Sergeant, Kimball said coldly. We need systems that protect victims and hold perpetrators accountable, regardless of rank, regardless of connections. Senator Ashford leaned forward. Sergeant Kruger, I'm going to ask you a direct question. How many women did you assault during your 18 years of service? Kruger was silent for a long moment. Cross was whispering urgently in his ear, but Kruger wasn't listening anymore. I don't know, he finally said. Maybe 8 or 9 that I remember clearly. Sergeant, we have testimony from 19 women. Then I lost count. His voice was hollow. I lost count of how many lives I damaged, how many careers I destroyed. The hearing room was absolutely silent. Christ, Kruger whispered, what have I done? Ashford let the moment hang, then turned to the next witness. Colonel Garrett Rourke, please come forward. Rourke approached like a man walking to his execution. He'd aged visibly, new lines around his eyes, gray in his hair. He wore his dress uniform, every ribbon precisely placed, but the uniform couldn't hide what was happening underneath. Colonel Rourke, you received 12 harassment complaints regarding Master Sergeant Kruger over your 15-year tenure at Camp Pendleton. Why did you dismiss every single one? Rourke's prepared statement died in his throat. He looked at the stack of evidence, at the 19 women in the gallery, at Kira's unwavering gaze. I followed the legal advice from my staff judge advocates in each instance, he began, but the words sounded hollow. Ashford produced an email. This shows you ordered dismissals before JAG review in at least 7 cases. You didn't follow legal advice, Colonel. You prevented legal review. General Kruger was my commanding officer, Rourke said, his composure cracking. He built my career. Every promotion, every assignment, I owed all of it to him. When his son's first complaint came in, the general made it clear what was expected of me. General Kruger retired in 1992. Why did you continue protecting Wade Kruger for 11 more years? Rourke's hands were shaking. Because it became easier to transfer the women than address the problem, easier to maintain unit cohesion than challenge a popular NCO, easier to tell myself I was protecting the institution than admit I was protecting one man at the expense of everyone under my command. Easier than justice, Colonel? Yes, Senator. Rourke looked at the 19 women. Easier than justice. And I will regret that choice for the rest of my life. Senator Ashford pulled out another document. Colonel, I'm going to read something, and I want you to tell me if you recognize it. She began reading. Kira felt ice in her veins as she recognized the words. The memo from General Marcus Kruger. Major Rourke, suppress Sullivan complaint immediately. My son's career cannot be jeopardized by one unstable female Marine. This is direct guidance from flag rank. Comply or face consequences to your own advancement. Ashford looked up. Do you recognize this memorandum, Colonel? Yes, ma'am. Did you comply with these orders from a retired general officer who had no legal authority over you? Yes, ma'am. Why? Because I was a coward, Rourke's voice broke. Because I valued my career more than Bryn Sullivan's life. More than 19 women's dignity, more than my oath to protect every Marine under my command. He looked directly at Kira. Captain Stone did what I should have done 15 years ago. She stood up to a predator when everyone else was looking away. She sacrificed her reputation, possibly her career, to protect Marines I was supposed to protect. She's a better officer than I ever was. The hearing continued for another 3 hours. Testimony from the 19 women. Testimony from Lancaster about the depth of the conspiracy. Testimony about the network of officers who'd systematically covered up complaints across multiple Marine installations. By the time Ashford gavelled the hearing closed, the scope of the scandal was clear. Not just Camp Pendleton, not just Wade Kruger, a systemic failure that had victimized 47 women across 4 Marine bases. 8 perpetrators, 15 officers who'd covered up complaints. This committee will recess for deliberation, Ashford announced, but I can tell you now that we will be recommending comprehensive reforms to military harassment policies across all service branches. And we will be recommending criminal prosecution for those who violated their sacred trust. As the chamber cleared, Kira found herself surrounded by the 19 women. Bethany Walsh, Sienna Blackwood, 11 others whose names she'd learned over the past week. Thank you, Walsh said simply, for believing us, for fighting for us. You fought for yourselves, Kira corrected. I just gave you a platform. Gunny Maddox appeared through the crowd, his dress blues immaculate, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Bryn can rest now, he said quietly. You gave her justice, Stone. After 9 years, you finally gave her peace. The aftermath moved with bureaucratic inevitability, military courts-martial, forced retirements, criminal prosecutions. Wade Kruger pleaded guilty to 7 counts of sexual assault and 3 counts of conduct unbecoming. 15 years in federal prison, dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of all pay and benefits. His father, Brigadier General Marcus Kruger, faced federal obstruction of justice charges. At 71 years old, he died of a heart attack 3 weeks before his trial. Colonel Garrett Rourke was court-martialed and convicted. 8 years in military prison, reduction in rank to private, loss of pension. The 4 other officers who'd systematically buried complaints received lesser sentences, but all were discharged. The 15 officers who'd enabled the conspiracy were forced into retirement, their pensions intact, but their legacies destroyed. And through it all, the Marine Corps bled. Recruitment down, retention down, public trust shattered. But it was also changing. 6 months after the hearing, on a cold February morning in 2004, Captain Kira Stone stood in a conference room at Marine Corps Base Quantico, Virginia. The promotion ceremony was small, just close friends and family. But when the Admiral pinned the gold oak leaves of a major on her uniform, Kira felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Her daughter Harper stood in the front row, 17 years old now, wearing pride and determination that Kira recognized from her own reflection. After the ceremony, they walked together through Quantico's tree-lined paths, winter sun painting everything in shades of gold. "Mom, they're saying you changed everything." "Things are changing, sweetheart. Different is still a long way off." Kira pulled her jacket tighter against the cold. "But change is a start." "Are you scared? About the new assignment? About all the people who still hate what you did?" Kira thought about that. Major, Marine Corps Training and Education Command, tasked with rewriting harassment protocols across all Marine installations. "I'm not scared of them," she said. "I'm scared of failing the women who trusted me, of not being able to deliver on the promise that things will be better." That's a heavy weight to carry, but I'm going to carry it anyway. Kira looked at her daughter. When you see something wrong, when you have the power to change it, staying silent makes you complicit. I couldn't live with that. Harper was quiet for a moment, then softly, "Mom, I've made a decision. I want to apply to the Naval Academy. I want to become a Marine officer." Kira stopped walking. "Why?" "Because you showed me the Corps is worth fighting for, worth fixing." Harper met her mother's eyes. "I want to be part of that." Kira felt her throat tighten. "It's going to be hard, Harper. Harder for you than it was for me, in some ways. You'll always be the daughter of that woman who broke Kruger's knee. Some will respect you for it. Others will make you pay for it." "I know. But you taught me that being scared doesn't mean you don't act. It means you have to act, because if you don't, the fear wins." Gunny Maddox had 4 more years after that. 4 years watching Kira build the systems Bryn never got to see. 4 years of monthly visits to Arlington, white roses on a grave that finally had justice. April 2008, the call came at dawn. Maddox had died peacefully in his sleep, 72 years old. His funeral was full military honors, flag-draped coffin, 21-gun salute, taps played by a young Marine. Kira stood at attention in her dress blues, watching them lower the warrior who'd made everything possible into the ground. His attorney handed her a letter afterward. She opened it that evening, alone in her quarters. "Kira, if you're reading this, I'm finally at rest, and I hope to God I'm with Bryn, telling her about everything you accomplished. You asked me once why I kept fighting after they forced me out. The truth is, I couldn't let go. Couldn't accept that Bryn died for nothing. But you changed that. You turned her death into meaning. You gave 19 women justice. You changed a system that seemed unchangeable. The chevrons I gave you, my Vietnam chevrons, I want you to understand what they represent. 40 years of service, 3 tours in Vietnam, Desert Storm, hundreds of Marines trained, and 1 goddaughter lost to a system I failed to protect her from. You succeeded where I failed. You broke the machine. You proved that one person, standing in the right place at the right time with the right amount of courage, can change everything. I'm proud of you, Major Stone. Prouder than I have words to express. You're the Marine I always hoped to be. Give them hell, make it count, and never forget that Bryn is watching, grateful beyond measure. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, to the core we love, not the one that failed us. Gunny, Declan, Maddox. Kira folded the letter carefully, her vision blurring. She looked at the grave, at the headstone that would mark where the old warrior finally found peace. "Mission accomplished, Gunny," she whispered. "Rest easy." The work continued. By 2010, the Military Justice Improvement Act passed Congress with bipartisan support, removing harassment cases from the chain of command and creating independent investigative bodies. Female recruitment numbers climbed for the first time in a decade. Retention rates improved. 47 women received justice, 8 perpetrators imprisoned, 15 officers discharged. And in 2013, 10 years after breaking Kruger's knee, Major Kira Stone taught close quarters combat at Quantico. 40 Marines, half women, a future Bryn died dreaming about. "Ma'am, is it true you broke a master sergeant's knee in front of 500 Marines?" a young male Marine asked. The class went silent, everyone interested in Kira's answer. "I neutralized a threat using appropriate defensive force," Kira said calmly. "That's the job. That's what you're all being trained to do." A female Marine, 22 and confident in a way that would have been impossible 15 years ago, asked, "Did you regret it, ma'am?" Kira paused, looking at the diverse faces staring back at her. Men and women training together as equals, a future that had cost more than anyone should have had to pay. "I regret that I had to do it," she said finally, "but I don't regret doing it. There's a difference." She resumed the demonstration, and as the class practiced the techniques, Kira felt the weight of Gunny Maddox's chevrons in her pocket. Carried them everywhere now, a reminder of the price of justice and the cost of silence. Her phone buzzed. Harper, now a second-year midshipman at the Naval Academy, top of her class. "Mom, made the dean's list again, and I've been selected for a summer training cruise, following in your footsteps." Kira smiled, typing back, "Never follow in my footsteps. Blaze your own trail. That's an order." The response came immediately, "Yes, ma'am, but I learned that from watching you." That evening, Kira drove to Arlington Cemetery. 2 graves now, Bryn Sullivan and Declan Maddox, side by side, goddaughter and godfather, reunited in death. She placed white roses on both headstones. "The Senate passed comprehensive military justice reform today," she told them. "Independent oversight for all harassment cases, mandatory reporting, real consequences for officers who bury complaints. It took 10 years, but we got there." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of cherry blossoms. 47 women received justice. 8 perpetrators are in prison. 15 officers were discharged. Female recruitment is up 65%. The culture is changing, slowly but undeniably. She touched Bryn's headstone. "You didn't die for nothing. Your death became the catalyst that changed everything." Then Maddox's headstone. "You fought for 9 years to give her justice. You can rest now, Gunny. The mission is complete." Kira stood at attention and saluted both graves, held it for a long moment, then lowered her hand. As she walked back to her car, her mind drifted to all the women who'd found their voices because she'd found hers. To Harper and her generation, who would serve in a military finally learning to protect all its warriors. To the future Bryn Sullivan and Declan Maddox had died fighting for. The work wasn't finished. It would never be finished. There would always be new battles, new challenges, new systems to reform. But the foundation had been laid. The precedent set. The message delivered. No one is untouchable. No one is above justice. And silence is no longer an option. Kira drove through Arlington's gates, past the endless rows of white headstones marking the cost of service and sacrifice. The sun was setting, painting the marble monuments in shades of gold and amber. Her phone rang. Senator Ashford. "Major Stone, I wanted to inform you personally. The President is nominating you for promotion to Lieutenant Colonel, and the Secretary of Defense wants you to testify at next month's hearing on the Military Justice Reform Act. Of course, Senator, whatever's needed. After the call ended, Kira sat in the parking lot, watching the last light fade from the sky. She thought about the boot flying at her ribs, about the crack of Kruger's knees shattering, about 19 women finding their voices, about Bryn Sullivan's grave and Gunny Maddox's letter, about Harper blazing her own trail through the Naval Academy, about all the daughters who would serve because one woman refused to back down. She pulled out Gunny Maddox's letter, read the final lines one more time. "You're the Marine I always hoped to be. Give them hell. Make it count. Semper Fidelis. Always faithful. To the core we love, not the one that failed us." Kira folded the letter carefully and placed it back in her pocket, next to the Vietnam-era gunnery sergeant chevrons. Then she started her car and drove toward Quantico, toward the office where case files waited for her attention, toward the future where her daughter would serve, toward the legacy she and Gunny Maddox and Bryn Sullivan had built together. The breaking point hadn't been when Kruger's knees shattered. It had been when a system chose silence over justice, convenience over courage, tradition over truth. Kira hadn't just broken one man's knee that August day in 2003. She'd broken a conspiracy of silence, 20 years old. She'd broken the code that protected predators and punished victims. She'd broken the illusion that rank and connections placed anyone above accountability. And in breaking those things, she'd helped build something better, something worthy of the oath every Marine swore, something that honored the sacrifice of those who'd paid the ultimate price. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, to the core, to truth, to justice, to every warrior who deserved better. The mission continued.